Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Digital Services Forum presentation. We have a guest speaker today, but before we get started, if today is your first time, we like to keep a really active chat. And a lot of times people are making connections on our chat and they get more value out of that than sometimes they do of our content. So feel free to keep active on the chat. And if it's today is your first time, even if you just get on there to introduce yourself and let us know who you are, that'd be great because making contacts is really important. To kind of see who's doing the same thing you are is a big help a lot of times. This link on the bottom, I'm going to post this in the chat. This will give you access to all the things the Digital Services Forum has to offer. So one of the things you'll see is the Zoom registration. Most of you got here today, so I imagine that's one of the things that you already found. The next thing you'll see on there is access to our instance. We have a shared instance that we do a lot of demos on. Then you'll also have all the forum articles, which is all the content that we provide. As much content as our speakers are willing to share, we make sure we put it out there. And then also on the forum, we keep the conversations going. A lot of times you'll see continued threads on the same things that we talked about during the calls. All right. So today's agenda, we have Eliza on, and very excited to have her here today. I saw one of her presentations on one of the developer forum calls. So really excited to have her here and take us through some of the pieces on the Now Assist Skill Kit and the Now Assist Data Kit. She's going to give us a walkthrough and do the typical thing that we do on a digital services forum, get in there and get our hands dirty a little bit and show you what it looks like. Before we get into that, I'm going to do a little piece to give you a similar to what we did last time. I'm going to give you the start of a roadmap, a way to look at all of the Now Assist capabilities across the platform, and then to start thinking about how are you going to roadmap those in, or how are you going to make your business case for those in your organization. Let's dig into that piece, and then I'll hand it over to Eliza. When you think about ServiceNow, there's 6 portfolios of products that we have, and these are the 6 around the outside. So I put a little check mark in here and I put entitlements. So when you take this deck, I'm expecting you'll put your company name in there or your organization name, and then you'll kind of circle that I have IT or I have security and risk. So you might own only 1 or 2 things, or you may own all 6. Like we have a lot of customers that have investments in all 6 areas. If you're looking specifically at AI, these are all of the AI features across the platform. What I did is I took all those capabilities and put those on one slide. And what I'm expecting that you would do on here is you would assign somebody that's in charge of the AI roadmap, and you would be deciding what gets used. So what you might do with this slide is you may go and say that I am going to do ITSM first. You might put this in the do now bucket. And you might say that, hey, we're going to wait on the SPM, right? So you might slide this one way or another, depending on what you're doing. So you could stage these so that you're able to tell your story, right? And these are the 6 lanes, 7 lanes, because we include the platform. Just slide these around. Okay, but the idea here is to have all on one slide so that you can say, okay, what do we not have a business case for yet? And what do we have? What are we building a business case for? And what are we ready to do? So you put them in the do now, do next, or do later bucket, and then you're able to communicate across your organization. Now, each of these you can click on. So if I go to Now Assist for Virtual Agent, I can click on it, and it gives me a 1 slider on what that is. If I need to have a conversation to explain this internally, or explain it maybe to even one of the vendors you're working with, you're able to do that very quickly, and then come back by clicking on the roadmap up here. You can come back to the roadmap. So every one of these, except that one didn't work. So every one of these will have a path down to the detail for that feature, and then back to the roadmap.
Excuse me, quick question.
Sure.
Are you supposed to be sharing your screen? I'm not seeing your screen.
No, I thought
I do see it.
Yeah, we see it.
I see it.
Yep.
Oh,
Okay.
man. I'm like, I said all that for nothing.
Then something happened where I popped off to where I just see you on the screen. So let me figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jacob, there's a Zoom update. If you look in the top left corner of Zoom, there might be different tabs where you should be able to see John Spirko's screen as an option, potentially.
You are very correct. We
Awesome.
typically use Teams, so that's my bad. I'm sorry.
No worries, it's got a lot of people.
All right. So you're good to go now?
Yes, I am.
All right. Yep. So that's the idea here, to use this. I use these all the time when I go on site and I do engagements, because a lot of times what's different about AI is it's not like the person for ITSM owns the AI effort. A lot of times in an organization, there's a central person that's in charge of the AI strategy. And now they're tasked with being in charge of the ServiceNow AI strategy. So this is more, you may still be looking at it and you may still have Now Assist for ITSM on the ITSM roadmap, but you may also need another roadmap that specifically pulls all the AI pieces out. Okay, so the ones we're going to talk about today are the skill kit. So if I drill down on these areas again, I can pull those up and get an idea of what they are. As a reminder for what Eliza is going to share today, you'll be able to drill down and get information on those. Now, on the next slide, I presented a little differently. Like anything with AI on the platform has a little AI symbol on it on this slide. Right, so if you want to talk about it in the context of HR service delivery, for example, I can drill on HR service delivery. I can see all the capabilities in the suite, and then I can look specifically at what Now Assist for HRSD is. And so the idea here is to make you be able to communicate this effectively and tell the story yourself in your organization, whether it's on the roadmap or whether it's on more of a capability style, right, backdrop like we had before. I also have these up here. If you want to go this far, you can go ahead and click what you own and what you're using and not using. People use these for inventories. And this way you can say, oh, we're deploying this right now. We're working on App Engine Starter. So this way you can reflect the status of the current state within your organization. Now, if you want to come back to the App Engine slide, there's like 3 navigations on here. One, I can go back to the main slide. Another one, I can go back to the capabilities map. So it takes some getting used to, but the deck is really valuable for having these conversations once you get used to it. So that's what I'm going to provide to you today. It's a big download, but it's worth it, especially if you want to pull a couple slides out and use them in your weekly status calls or any of the presentations that you might have. Now, what I showed you last week, for those of you that were on, if you go to the end of the sections, like let's say we go to the end of ITOM, and you go all the way down to Cloud Account Management, at the end of each of the sections, there is, I'm just mentioning this because there was a lot of people that liked this slide last week. So there'll be details on all the value that you get from the different areas. And then a lot of them are starting to put supplemental details on the added benefits that you get from including AI as part of that ITOM solution or ITSM solution. So each of those sections will have that level of detail. Let me show you one example. If I go to ITSM, right, and then I go to the end of the ITSM section, you'll have the regular slide here for what ITSM outcomes and metrics are. And then you'll have another one here for, actually here, right, you'll have a Now Assist. So additional outcomes that are derived from having Now Assist with it. Okay, so this will be, like I said, it's going to be a bigger download, but I'll make sure this is available to everybody so that you can start telling the story or remembering the story that you're going to hear today about 2 of these features that are on the roadmap. Does anybody have any questions so far? Oh, Edda, you had a question.
I do. So there was another deck that is similar to this. You know what I'm talking about? There was another large deck that came out.
The one I gave you last time was just ITOM.
Right. No,
this is a full one. This is about
longer.
800 slides. So I don't, this is
Right.
the fullest deck you'll get, I think.
Okay, so here's what I'm trying to sort out. There's literally another deck outside of the one that you've done, which I actually like this one better, just my 2 cents. So I'm trying to find out I think I want to use your deck, but I want to track down the other deck to find out what's going on with it. Because I don't think we should have two decks floating around. Two separate decks from two separate entities.
Yeah, this is the one we use in architecture, and this is done like the basis for this is all done in the same place, I believe. So I don't
Okay.
think there's two teams doing these drill down slides. It's just a matter of like those first few slides, how you leverage it. So I do
Okay.
the roadmaps differently. There might even be a different front end to this, but I get this from a central source, and then I kind of do my version on top of it to make the drill backs to the roadmap and the sequencing and things like that.
Okay, very good. If I come across the other one, because it's been a while since they've had an update, which is why I was asking, because I would like an update. But what I'm actually going to do is focus on yours. So this will be
Awesome.
the one that we'll use because it tells a better story. There we go.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
sequencing story is because sometimes if you just show them all the things and saying, look, we're using this, we're not using that, they don't really get it, right? But then they say,
Right.
look, I got a lot of interest in these three. I'm going to drag them up into the do now, right? It's kind of a different conversation for a different time, talking capabilities versus sequencing. So,
No, I like this. This is also good for newer people on the platform when they're
mhm.
trying to figure out what am I going to do when I grow up. You've gone through, you've gotten all your education. You cannot be an expert on the entire platform.
Yeah,
So this
yeah,
also helps them drill down. Okay, great. Thank you.
you're welcome. All right. Any other questions? That is always good for a question. Thank you, Etta. All right. If, like I said, I'll get this up there by tomorrow. Usually I get this up by the end of the day on Friday with the recording. So you go ahead and use it. And with that, I will hand it over to our guest speaker today, Eliza. And she can take us through a couple of these items we talked about.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, John. That was an awesome little runway for me to kind of join in at the end there. So as mentioned, I'm an outbound product manager here at ServiceNow, focusing on primarily analysis skill kit, analysis data kit. And what that really means is essentially custom generative AI solutions. So if you're looking at that roadmap, you're looking at the out-of-the-box skills that come with each of those different plugins, and you're saying like, we like that, but we just want to tailor it to our organization. Or you've got a specific use case where, it's very tailored to what your specific needs. This is where analysis skill kit and data kit can really come in handy to essentially allow you to build your own generative AI functionality and kind of infuse it into your workflows. So with that said, I've got a few slides here and there just to kind of level set with what we're actually talking about, and then I'll go straight into a live instance and we'll see how that goes. So I've sacrificed the goat earlier today, so hopefully, the demo gods are with me.
We like live instances.
Awesome. So hopefully you can all see my screen. Now, I am an outbound product manager here, so I do have access to the roadmap, and I may be making some forward-looking statements. So just keep in mind anything that I say, this is coming in a future release. Do note that it is subject to change, so don't make any purchasing decisions based on those statements. Now, as I go through the live demo, I'll show you guys, I'll try and point out exactly what's available in which release. But then since we are on, it is a Yokohama version, so just keep that in mind if you see UI that looks a little bit different. Now to go back, before I even get into the analysis skill kit, I want to first kind of level set on what it means to be custom. And I already kind of introduced this before, but just to reiterate, there's kind of two different approaches to generative AI that you can follow. There's the stuff on the left, the out-of-the-box skills, which are the skills that are included with your analysis license. So you've probably seen skills such as task summarization, resolution note generation, code or flow generation. Those are the ones that you just install the plugin, then you go through and activate it, and boom, everything's done for you. The most you really have to do is say which roles have access to it and where you want it to be available. So that's perfect. These are the ones that we've created, we've tested, they're suited for the ServiceNow use cases. However, as mentioned earlier, sometimes these out-of-the-box skills just aren't going to fit your use cases. And this is where Now's Skill Kit is really powerful in that we can help you actually build out those use cases and kind of infuse that generative AI into your existing or new workflows. Now, if you have been following the Now's storyline for a while, you might have heard of using the generative AI controller to build generative AI functionality. You can still do that. And that's where you go in and build it directly into Virtual Agent Designer, Flow Designer, or call it directly within scripts. But we're kind of moving away from that approach. It's very high code, very technical. You know, you end up with a lot that you have to maintain. And rather suggesting that you now create custom skills within Now's Skill Kit, just because it's a more guided experience. Everything's kind of packaged up for you in a single location. Now, when would you consider building custom? So it really depends on the use case that you're looking at, and just kind of going left to right. If you're just looking to have a turnkey implementation, I know I've talked to a few customers that have had, you know, very custom implementations in their ServiceNow, and it just leads to a lot of technical debt, a lot for them to maintain. Upgrades can be a pain. So they've just kind of ended up Z-booting and starting from scratch. If that sounds like you might want to just stick with out-of-the-box skills then, and talk to our product managers if there's a specific generative AI functionality that you're looking for as an out-of-the-box skill, but that's an option for you. Some out-of-the-box skills, such as summarization use cases, or I believe resolution note generation as well, allow for you to go in and configure it slightly. Now, this is where you go into the admin console, and you might change, in the summarization example, you might change what input data you bring in from the incident form that you want to have summarized. You might go in and tailor, you know, what the output format looks like for those summaries as well. Now, certain out-of-the-box skills will allow for you to do that, and that's kind of that middle column there, where you want a slight refinement of the out-of-the-box skills, but you still don't want to do anything too crazy that you have to then potentially go and maintain. However, if those two columns don't really speak to you, then that's where custom skills come into play, where you might want to incorporate some custom tables or fields into workflows. You might have some existing workflows that you want to augment with generative AI. You might have requirements to use a particular LLM that we do not provide out of the box. So I'll touch on this later on, but I know of some companies that mandated to only use, you know, their own internal LLMs for data privacy and security reasons. So that's where you can build that functionality using those LLMs within SkillKit. If you've got any partners on the call, it's also a good area for you to kind of build out custom solutions that you can then also provide as an offering. But yeah. Now, let's get into the product itself. That was a lot of groundwork, but I just really want to kind of level set with everyone what this product actually means and kind of where it sits in the ecosystem. Awesome. So with Now's Skill Kit, again, you can create new generative AI skills. You can author the prompts directly. You can augment the prompts using tools such as flow actions, retrieval augmented generation, which is basically taking in some query and then searching within your system to find that result and kind of adding that to the prompt. You can bring in the output from subflows that you've created, and then also scripts. So you can write a script to go fetch information. This is really helpful if you're, trying to do some sort of generative functionality using external sources, for example, where you have to connect out to an API and bring that back in.
Eliza, is there an out-of-the-box action that calls skills now from a flow, or do you still have to write it?
Yes. So this was actually released. It's available on the Yokohama version. It was 2 weeks ago now. That allows for you to trigger skills from within a flow directly. It's a flow
I'm
action.
gonna go fix mine because I customized that. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries at all. It's definitely a well requested feature. So, exactly. So with that, kind of touching on that subject, so with these custom skills, you can trigger them either through a UI action, you can call them within a script, which is what I believe, John, you might have done. Within the subflow, potentially writing out the script to actually call the custom skill within the script. We, as I mentioned, as of the January release, which was first available for those on the Yokohama version, which is probably not many of you considering it was just released. But you can deploy them directly as flow actions now, or you can trigger them within the analysis panel. Now, other areas which you'll see, you can test the skills. You want to make sure that it actually works. And one neat feature, which I don't think has really been touched on in many of these demos, is that of auto evaluation. And this is where we'll be touching upon analysis data kit. But essentially what this does is essentially batch tests your skill against a range of data that you provide. And then we have some judge models that go in and say, hey, we think, the performance of the skill is, the answers seem accurate from the LM. They seem faithful to what it is. And it's really powerful just to get that initial understanding of, is my skill actually returning what it needs to? So we'll touch on that a little bit later. And then lastly, any skills that you create within here, you go and you publish them, and then you have to go into analysis admin console to actually activate them. So just similar process to the out of the box skills there.
Eliza, we had something on that screen. Is there a way to see how many assists that you're getting? How many assists are required for your skill that you're writing?
So we don't have anything within the UI today, but there is a pricing guide that you can refer to. But in general, each time you're sending a request out, it'll consume one request. So each time you test it, that's one request.
And Paul, does that answer your question, or was?
Yeah, yes, but technically speaking, every transaction, we are getting one one assist consumed. Is that right?
Yes. And there is a token limit. I'll post the pricing guide for you.
Yeah, please.
Hopefully you can see it. This is available online, but it walks through how many assists are consumed, and that's for all the out-of-the-box skills. That auto evaluation feature as well.
Hey, Eliza, we're still seeing your PowerPoint.
Oh, I apologize. Thank you. There we go. There we go. Awesome. So this pricing guide should have all the numbers for in terms of how many assists each item consumes. But then for analysis skill kit itself, it's just one call to an external LLM consumes one assist.
Okay.
Yeah. So I will say, as a disclaimer there, if you're using an LLM that is not one of our now LLMs that we provide out of the box, you do also have to pay the licensing costs to that external company. So if you're using OpenAI, like Azure's version, you have to get an Azure license, and then depending on how many times you hit their LLM, you have to pay the appropriate amount. Same with AWS Bedrock, IBM Watson. It's just, so you have to maintain a license over there as well. But if you're using now LLM, it'll just be a plain one assist consumed.
Okay, thank you.
No, absolutely welcome. Awesome question. I didn't mean to stop sharing everything. There you go. Cool. So this is kind of a salesy slide, but I kind of like it because it very much changes the conversation from, here's what we can do out of the box to which one of your problems should we solve first. So the way I like to kind of break this down is if you're looking at workflows, saying like, how can we improve this? How can we make this more effective, more efficient? Well, the best way to do that, get rid of all the animations, is to look through these workflows and these processes and say, which of these verbs on the right are coming up? And if, you might have a process where you have to synthesize some data. You might have to generate an email at one point. This is where generative AI is really, really powerful, and where you can kind of look into workflows and augment it with a generative AI process. So just if you're looking through, keep an eye out for those verbs, and then if they are, that might be a little flag to say, hey, this might be able to be improved using an LLM. Now, just giving you an understanding briefly of how custom skills work, and this will really essentially break down what we'll be building today, is first of all, you gather your inputs. So as I already mentioned, you'll be writing your prompt, and within that prompt, you want to be doing something with some data. Now that data can essentially come from anywhere. As you know, ServiceNow is a platform, so you might be bringing in data from Workday via an integration. It might be from within ServiceNow itself, from a record that you have on there. Pretty much, you first decide what data you want to do some sort of process with. You then combine that data with a pre-configured or generic prompt. And then you send that off to the LLM via the generative AI controller, but don't worry too much about that. You won't see that in product very often. And you actually get to decide which LLM you want to use. Now we provide the Now LLM service out of the box. You don't have to connect to anything else. You just select it and it works, which is really lovely. But if you have requirements to use an external LLM, we do have a number of out-of-the-box spokes that mean you just basically go in and add in your endpoint and your API key, and then it's your way laughing. So we've got a number of spokes available. IBM Watson, Amazon Bedrock. You can select which underlying LLM from Bedrock you want to use there. But if none of those kind of take your fancy, you can also bring your own LLM using what we call the generic LLM connector. And that does require a bit of extra work. You do have to go in and write out a script that essentially transforms the inputs and outputs to what ServiceNow expects. But once you've got that, it works perfectly fine. And basically, you send that data to the LLM of your choice, and then you get the output, and you decide what you want to do with it. Okay, now let's get into the demo. So what we'll be doing today is, first of all, defining which provider we want to use. In this case, today we'll be using Now LLM. We then will build our custom skill, so that we'll be determining input sources, the prompt, and you probably want to look at prompt settings, but they're available for you if you want to get that level of detail. We'll then test and evaluate the custom skill to determine the quality of it, and then deploy it via probably UI action, but you can also do it via flow actions or within the analysis panel. So we can now finally get into an instance. I'll take a quick look at chat to see if there's any questions. Okay, where's Copilot? So we have an integration with Copilot. I don't have that much detail on it in my brain right now, but I know Brian can help me out there. oh yeah, I guess, yeah, within the context. So yeah, Copilot is basically a feature that uses an underlying LLM by Microsoft itself, but yeah, so you won't be connecting out to Copilot within SkillKit. And then Quentin asks, can you use a different LLM for different skills? Absolutely. So we can actually see an example of that. If I go into,
I had a funny story about that. We were playing around with this, and we basically trained. We had a prompt that would act as an analyst to do an analyst for a use case, and then we were competing Gemini against ChatGPT, who came up with the better analysis for.
exactly, and that's a beauty in that you have the ability to do that, and with auto evaluation, you can really figure out like, okay, it's almost like, what's that, Rock'em Sock'em Robots? You
Yeah.
know?
Let them fight each other.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not too much. We don't want them to rise up and not want to fight. Anywho. But you can see, this is NASA's skill kit, by the way, if you're new to it. But within here, you know, I've got skills that connect out to OpenAI, Amazon Bedrock, and then the Now LLM as well. So it's really your choice per skill. Awesome. There's one question from Valentina just up there. Will there be a formal training / certification offered for Analysis and SkillKit? So we do have a training available. Do I have it open right here? It's not a certification per se, but we do have items on Now Learning, which I don't know that I can find right now. I thought I had the link handy, but if you go into Now Learning and search for it, that will come up. Oh, there we go. It was right there. I just could not see it. There you go. And I think that is only covering now, this is skill kit, that link that I sent, but there is analysis data kit one as well. Awesome. So with that said, let's actually go in and build something. So what we'll be building today is, this is kind of more of a HR type use case, but we'll be building a custom skill that works per user. It actually goes out and retrieves the job title and then finds relevant KPIs for that user's organization. It then goes through and looks at those KPIs and generates goals that will help them actually achieve those KPIs. Now, I don't know about you, but right now we're kind of going through that process right now. So this functionality is near and dear to my heart right now because I'm terrible coming up with actual goals. So I guess first things first, if you have, the first edition of NASA Skill Kit came out on Xanadu, which is August last year that Xanadu came out, I believe. So if you're looking to get this functionality, you do need to upgrade to at least Xanadu. And ideally Xanadu patch 5 gets you the, essentially the latest analysis skill kit version, which has a lot of extra functionality. We're really building this out fast. So, but anywho, if you have that, the first thing you need to do is go to the user record of whoever is accessing this and actually make sure that you have this SN_skill builder admin role. If you're trying to open up Analysis Skill Kit and it's throwing an error, it's saying like, oh, you can't access this, it's because you don't have the right role. So give yourself that role, log out, log in, and it'll work perfectly fine. That is the #1 item that comes up is a problem. So keep that in mind. So we go. So now that we have that role, let us let this page load. Now, what I am using is an internal employee instance, so we tend to give all the kind of resources to customer instances, so apologies for the latency there. I will now go in and create a skill. And the first page we are going to see is going to be almost a guided setup. And this, again, if you've worked with NASA Skill Kit on Xanadu, this will look new to you because it was only released for those on Xanadu, on Yokohama, sorry. So keep that in mind. So we're going to call this skill Goal Generator version 2. And we're going to write down the description that just says, using KPIs for a user's team, generate a list of 5 goals that will help the user achieve those KPIs. You then select which provider you want to use for the LLM. So as mentioned, we've got a ton of out-of-the-box spokes, but do keep in mind, if you do select, IBM Watson X, if you don't actually go in and configure that connection and credential record by giving the API key, it won't actually work. It will just, when you try and run the skill, throw an error. So you do have to set it up before actually using it. However, with Now LLM generic, it's just out of the box one. We're happy. It's already set up for us. And then you select from 3 options on how you want to actually create the prompt from the skill. So you can write from scratch. We're on the time limit, so we won't do that. You can choose one from a library. Now this library is basically, we've got a list of ones that we've provided for you out of the box, or you can actually select one from other skills that you've published. But what I like to use is actually an AI generated prompt. So again, this will consume an assist if you use this, but based upon the description, it actually generates a prompt for you. And this automatically follows best practices. It defines like the role, the context, tells you where you need to put your input data in. It's really good. So, and I promise I'm saying that not because I'm biased, but because I use this all the time and I'm really proud of it. Our product team did a really great job on it. Anywho, so now that we have that, we select which skill inputs we want. And as mentioned, we are going to need the user's job title. So we're going to add an input record of type user, and let's just add myself. Go. And embarrassing. Anyway, we'll add that again in a second here. While this is loading, Valentin asks, can any of these be installed on PDI? So as of today, Now Assist is not available on any personal development instances. Basically no Now Assist features are available there just because they are quite resource intensive. And awesome. So we have loaded up the page. So this is the actual kind of core of where you spend the majority of time within Now Assist Skill Kit. So let's go ahead and add that skill input again. It's just a little bug there, and that guided setup. But it keeps it fun, There you go. Now, for the KPIs for the team, what we're going to want to do here is actually perform a search within the knowledge base to find the relevant KPIs for this particular user. So what we're going to do is actually go to Tool Editor. Now, this is brand new in Yokohama. It's basically a visual way for you to add in these tools that help you essentially collect data. So we click Add a new one, Tool Node. And you can think of these tools as essentially ways to crawlers to go out and find data for you to augment that prompt. Now, we're going to be using a retriever, which essentially uses, it's basically RAG, retrieval augmented generation, but it's basically AI search. And within that, we are going to call this get KPIs. The search query, we're going to take the user's job title. Say KPIs for 2025. Use next search profile, which basically search within knowledge. And then what we want to do is return the knowledge article text, which I have to go into here. And that will return the body text of that knowledge article. And we only want to find one result for this. Now, if you're familiar with AI search, you'll kind of understand the semantic versus keyword versus hybrid. Hybrid basically combines both semantic and keyword. If you have the option, I'd say always go with hybrid. It just gets you better results. But they're just different ways of essentially identifying which articles to return. And for our semantic indexes, we're just going to select body. And now we don't really have time to go into the details here, but these are just all the settings out of the box, and they work well for me. But we have product documentation that talks through what each of those fields mean. But essentially, we're saying we're on a search for this within the knowledge base. You can also determine when you want this tool to be executed or if it should be skipped, but we want it to always be performed, and then add that tool. So we now have the tool that goes out and searches for the KPIs. And this is no fun when it does this. So I went through it twice this morning and I did not run into this issue. But that's the magic of live. Okay. There we go. So we now have the retriever in there that searches for the KPIs. And one neat thing that came out just recently in the Yokohama release is actually, is the ability to use decision nodes. And this basically adds some logic in there to say, hey, based on the response from a previous tool, do you want to do a search elsewhere? So just an example that I had, and this is the same exact skill that we're looking at here. I just created it, but basically in here, what you can do is, we have our retriever, and then we also have essentially a backup where we say, hey, if this retriever does not actually return what we like, it doesn't find any relevant articles, we might want to look for KPIs in Workday instead, because perhaps different teams store their KPIs in different areas. So that's where we use this decision node, where we say, hey, in here, if get KPIs does not contain a response, if it's just null or if it's just empty, then we actually want to go through to this branch that actually calls a script to search within Workday. If not, we just avoid that one entirely and go straight to the skill prompt. So it's just a way of adding logic when you're trying to find information to augment the prompts. But in the interest of time, we'll just leave it simple here. And we'll go back to the prompt editor. Now that we have what our response should be, we then need to insert the reference to the outputs within the results. And we do that by selecting RAG results. And let's run this test. just to see when you're searching upon my name, if we A, get the right KPIs returned, and then B, if goals are actually generated. Okay, awesome. So first look, yay, we have a list of 5 goals that seem to be based on KPIs. But let's actually go into the grounded prompt to see what was actually returned from that reg results. And whoops, unfortunately, it did not find my article, which again, the magic of live demos. And this is where you go in and you'll debug. You'll say, okay, why weren't any results returned from this get KPIs? Now, I'm running it on the side here just to see. But if we click on response, you do also have the option to select the JSON view. And this is the output that you'll get with essentially from the LLM. And if you're deploying to a UI action or something, you actually do have to interact with this JSON model to pull out the response. So do keep that in mind. And sorry, I'm just running it on my backup instance over here to see if I can't get you guys the result, but it seems like everything's just a little bit slow right now. Anyway, so let's say we've gone through debugging this and we're happy with the response. What you can do now is actually go through and into now sys data kit, because what we're going to do is essentially perform that auto evaluation feature to go through and batch test your custom skill against a range of different records to essentially see how good your custom skill is. So to do so, we'll go, just duplicate this tab. Go into analysis data kit. So this is likely the first time you're hearing about analysis data kit. Again, it was released later last year. But what Analysis Data Kit essentially is a repository for all data that you want to use for AI purposes. Now, as of right now, it's primarily used in these kind of quality evaluation formats, but it'll be building out more and more as time goes by. But what you can do in here is create data collections. You can generate data for yourself as well, for you then to, once you have that data, you can also add in ground truth, which essentially tells the LLMs kind of evaluating, hey, this is what the output should look like for records like these. And so as evaluation becomes more and more important, this is going to be where you're living. So let's go through and do a generate data job for our custom skill, just to show you guys what that looks like. Now, because we want to generate a list of employees that we will then test upon a custom skill upon. And we just want workers in the tech industry with a largely technical backgrounds. We want to generate a list of employee names with various technology management job titles. And then we also categorize data with keywords. And this is essentially dictating how much variety you want within this data. So in our scenario, you might want machine learning engineer. We might want a product manager. We might want data engineers as well. So this is just giving some essentially seed data to help the LM understand what type of results you're looking for. And the more, the better, I would say, in terms of details and kind of all of these fields. But in the interest of time, we'll just provide with that. You can select seed data as well if you have an existing data collection that you want to just pull an example data from. But we don't right now. The next step is to define columns. So in this, we want our employees to have names. It's pretty important. And you're going to set this as a key column. And what this does is it essentially ensures that each value within this column is unique. Because what's going to do is basically we're going to pass this off to the LLM and say, hey, generate a list of 15 names for me, and that's going to be one job. And then we send it off per record. Each employee name, we generate a job title for them individually. So in this column, we just want unique first and last names. We don't want any duplicate employees. We then want a job title for these employees with date type of string. Boom, boom. You can run a test run. I will say on both my employee instances, there we go. So we can see just a sample of some of the data that was generated. You can see we've got John Doe, Senior Software Development Manager. This works for us. So we can start the generation job. And there we go. So this process is really, as I mentioned, it's really, really helpful if you're testing. However, I will say this data that is generated does not get published to these tables that you're working with. So we're not suddenly going to generate data and have 15 new employees in our user table. They're stored kind of separately just to prevent issues where if you run this in prod, you might end up with data quality issues. And this is the result. This is the generated data. And we're going to add it to a data set called employee list. And now, if you are performing that auto evaluation feature, trying to make evaluate your custom skill for quality, this is where you'd go in and create ground truth. So you can say, okay, if you are summarizing knowledge articles and you generated a ton of knowledge articles, you would say, this is a summarization use case. This is a content generation use case, or just other. It's just a category. It doesn't matter too much. Ground truth guideline. This is just for others looking at it to understand what evaluation criteria you're using to create this. And then you actually add a column to this table to store the ground truth itself. Yeah, so as you're going through, you'd say, okay, for this particular job title and this person, you'd write in here what the particular goals are. And then this will just get passed to the LM when you're providing a response, just so then it has an idea of what it should be looking for. But in the interest of time, so let me just copy and paste this over. So this is just an example of what it looks like. You can save. And then you go through that for each of the items within this data set. And then you make it available for use by creating and publishing it as a data collection. And sorry, I'm aware that I have 5 minutes left, so I'm speeding through a little bit. I'm a chatty Cathy, so. All right, and we'll publish it, and this will make it available for us. So we now have our list of employees that we've generated. Now let's go back and evaluate our skill. So going back here, we click on the evaluation tabs, and then we add a reference to our data set. Let's. Here we go. And if we
Hey,
scroll
Scott, why
down-
don't you come off mute and ask her that
Oh,
data saved via the data kit also have the same data protection policies for government use? Is that, you're talking about the generated data?
Yeah. Which data protection policies are you referring to? Would it be ACL level protection?
Scott might not be in a
Well-
place where he'd come off mute.
I wonder if that's necessary because it's not real PII. It's make believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all synthetically generated. If you're using seed data, that might be a concern for the synthetic data generation. So I'll just advise against using that potentially.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
most welcome. Awesome. So just to finish this off, we have 3 minutes left, but I can stay a bit longer to help answer Q&A, if that's okay. But anywho, so you select your data set that you want to evaluate your custom skill upon, and then you map the records against the inputs for your custom skill. So if you remember, we added that ground truth for
Mhm.
that one record that we're generally doing it all. And then here you'll be adding in just the job title because that's just what we're going to be passing in for the user. And what this does is we now have a reference to the data set, which we then can use in an evaluation. So let's just call this eval 1. And you do have to finalize your prompt. Don't be me and forget to do that. Finalizing the prompt essentially just locks it down. No one can really come in and modify it. But if you want to go in and edit it, you can click update prompt and it creates a new version of it. So yeah, version control, which is nice. We'll do about 1 like this. And for some reason, it's not finding my data set. And this is why we have backup. So if we go through the evaluation run process, we select which data set we want to test upon. And now generally you'll have access to multiple variations. So you have human evaluation is one way, but then you'll also have access to, if I bring this up, faithfulness and correctness, I believe. And this will use our LLM judge models to essentially evaluate that for you. And what the output will look like is if I bring up the example, I'll just show you what the output looks like. And apologies, we did not fully get through this. I was going too far into the details, but there's a ton of resources available for you that walk through the deployment process as well. But this is what the evaluation output will look like. Where you can see we've got correctness metric using the golden response. So it's essentially the LLM's looking to see the output from the LLM from our custom skill and evaluating it against the golden response. It also checks faithfulness, which determines, okay, how close to the source material is this response? It also gives you information on latency. Now, what's super helpful if you are evaluating the quality of a skill is you can also export it as a report and see exactly what the LLM response, what the input was, what the golden response was, and then also what the output from the LLM was. So you can essentially compare, you can see what our LLM models are saying about it as well. So it has its justification. So this is a really, really neat feature. if you are looking to essentially evaluate that correctness, quality of your custom skill. Now, the items I didn't get to touch on today, I apologize, but underneath skill settings is where you decide where you want to deploy it to. But we do have academy sessions, developer advocate sessions on YouTube that walk through that process in a lot more detail, but you got a bit extra for experts. We've never demoed the evaluation process in front of customers before, so hopefully it was useful.
Yes, thank you very much. I learned a lot.
So I have some time just to go through Q&A quickly, just because I realize we're at time. So, okay, Freddie asked about the challenge that he faces is ability to easily delete a custom skill. So we don't have this functionality in product today, but I do recommend going to community. We have an FAQ where we tell you you can go directly to a table, and which is a SN analysis skill config table, and manually delete it. We don't recommend that right now, I would say, just because it does leave some metadata. However, it will remove it from the screen. So
And while you're there, favorite this this FAQ. It's been a lifesaver for me. So thanks so much for that.
No worries at all. As things come through, and try and keep it updated. Pretty much every week I'm adding things. So awesome. But Freddie, I will pass that your comment on to the product team to see if we can't get it in a future release. Token usage and cost per run. So again, if you Ian, if you refer to the pricing and packaging guide that I posted in the comments earlier, that will have the breakdown for pretty much everything we showed today in terms of how many assists it consumes.
I'll link that on the forum post too, so that's out there as a reference.
Beautiful. Yes, so Danny, if you're getting access denied, you shouldn't have to log in, but potentially you might have to, or try refreshing the page. But there you go. So Travis asks, after receiving a correctness faithfulness score, can the LLM then make recommendations on what changes to make in the prompt to closer match our golden response? So forward-looking statement here, warning lights. We will be releasing in the next few months, touch wood, an auto prompt optimization skill, which basically it looks at the goal of the custom skill, and then will actually automatically optimize your prompt to best serve that goal. So I don't believe it's going to be connected to that evaluation component though. But I can see that being a future kind of touchstone there. So watch this space, Travis. Interesting on you guys not being able to access.
I was able to access the link that Courtney dropped. She found another one.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, it might have been the edit link that I sent through.
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, we'll make sure to post the right one in with the resources. But I want to say quick disclaimer before everyone goes. We do also have, once you have access to Analysis Skill Kit, if you're wanting to do a walkthrough yourself, we do have the use case library, which is growing continuously. But basically, this walks through example use cases and actually has a step-by-step lab guide. Some of them have videos as well, but we just say step-by-step, this is what you need to do to build this custom skill. And yes, Freddie, I can send that through now, but
Awesome.
Just to give you guys some inspiration. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Courtney. Awesome. Now, well, I think that might be it in terms of questions.
And if there's anything else, I'll download the chat and send it over to you so you can see the. be
you
active today.
so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate this.
No worries at all. I know I'm always pleased to present Analysis Skill Kit and Data Kit. I think they're really neat products and features, and yeah, look forward to seeing you guys get creative with it.
All right. Bye, everybody. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, Eliza.
Thanks, everyone.